All right, cool. Let's talk to Emily. Hi, Emily. You are on the Atheist Experience. What would you like to talk about today?
Um, so I would like to talk about mental illness, irregular brain functions, and religion. And I just want to clarify that I know that religion is not a mental illness. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not calling to say that religious people are mentally ill. It's more that I'm wondering if people who have brain dysfunction or mental illness are more likely to be religious. And I kind of got interested in this topic because I have OCD and I have scrupulosity. And
Okay.
I was looking into hyperreligiosity as a symptom
Mm-hmm.
because it came up in a therapy session. And and apparently hyperreligiosity includes atheism too, but I couldn't find a lot of research of it in medical conditions. But it came up as hyperreligiosity, as scrupulosity and OCD, psychosis with bipolar, schizophrenia, just random psychosis, certain encephalopathies, epilepsy,
Mm-hmm.
especially the Geschwin syndrome or anything temporal,
That makes
frontotemporal
sense.
lobar degeneration, drugs like LSD and ayahuasca, anything like hallucinogens,
Mm-hmm.
near-death experiences. It seems like brains that aren't functioning properly seem to have either seem to trigger like either really powerful religious experiences or seem to make people be more religious either in a negative way, like with the OCD, where it's really anxious and uncomfortable, or in a really positive way, like with a lot of near-death experiences or with epilepsy. And because didn't the lady who created Seventh-day Adventist have epilepsy, and that was the cause of her
I
visions or
don't
something? I don't know.
know the answer to that. So there's a lot of content in there, and I know a little bit about it, and I can say a few things on it, but I can't go too far because I don't like to say anything without fully researching to make sure that I'm absolutely correct. Um, but when
Okay.
it comes to dysfunction, so dysfunction in the brain, it is absolutely possible that somebody can have like a deep religious experience or a hyperfixation on a form of religion as a result of damage or dysfunction. That's entirely possible, and that's not just dependent on where the brain, which brain region is damaged either, because your brain is like a complex interconnected structure. So how we function isn't just the brain as well, like there's external influence. So if you're raised in a hyper religious environment, for example, where you are constantly exposed to religious literature and discussions about religious experiences and what those may look like, or things like demons, yada yada yada, and you develop a form of schizophrenia, let's say, like this is just like one example, it's there's a high degree of likelihood that you may have forms of hallucinatory delusions that revolve around that, because you have that specific affect already like baked into your brain, like baked into the chemistry of your brain, because you have memories that are surrounding it, you have portions of your identity that are attached to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to other religious experience, and I heard you mention like ayahuasca, for example, I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but there's specific sets of neurotransmitters that can get activated when you have like a full system that can get activated when you have a hallucinatory experience. During the hallucinatory experience, you're often not, you know, aware of how you're are currently or are going to interpret the experience. That takes place after the fact, like when you're kind of doing a triage of what happened and where it fits in your mind. And the way that our brain works is, it looks at what we remember and what we know, and it tries to fit that weird experience that we have into existing schema, into existing framework that we have. And most of the experiences that we have in extant reality don't have like this sort of like magical, like illusory, like mystical sort of like colorful component to them. So where it fits best, these experiences in the framework that we have available to us, is in sort of the category of religious or spiritual experiences. That's the best way that we know how to explain it. So more commonly than not, people would like put it into the category of like this sort of like religious spiritual experience, because it doesn't really fit necessarily anywhere else, and because it was an actual experience that they had, like that was a legitimate actual experience, something they tangibly experienced took place for them. They're going to buy it more that it was the case that this was a religious experience, because they need to categorize it somewhere, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but so that sounds like how near-death experiences are processed, where after the event, your brain is trying to make sense of it. Is that kind of what you're saying, where you have the experience and then afterwards your brain is kind of like, what the fuck, and is trying to figure out
yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like near-death experiences, I often wonder, there's a little bit of science around your sigma-6 receptor. So there's a sigma-6 receptor that's on your neurotransmitters. And what your sigma-6 receptor exists for is to prevent something called cell apoxia. So cell apoxia takes place when like any cell that you have is no longer getting enough oxygen to function. So when you're near death, these sigma-6 receptors become like very open and active, and are getting the, I think it's called dimethyltryptamine. It's DMT. I can't remember the full name.
Dimethyltryptamine. Yeah, you're right.
There, one type of that, because there's more than one type of DMT. It will bond to that cell receptor, and it can create a kind of a hallucinatory experience. But that hallucinatory experience is taking place because your body is physically trying to prevent cell apoxia. It's trying to keep itself alive, and it's activating those sigma-6 receptors. So I think some near-death experiences are kind of allegorical to, or similar to, at least from a neurochemical perspective, to these other hallucinatory experiences in that fashion. So there's limited science on it, but I've read some papers about it, and it's pretty interesting. And I think that would potentially also be the case, because where are you going to fit that? What framework are you going to put that in after the fact? Like someone like me, I would be like, oh man, I almost died, and my brain went, oh, our cells are dying, we have to do something about this. And then these receptors opened up, and I had a weird hallucinatory experience because of oxygen deprivation, my brain not functioning normally, and me having a mild hallucinogen being consistently accepted into my cells, like into my neurons. So like that kind of makes sense to me. But if you don't have that background, like where are you going to couch that, right? Like where are you going to put that? Where are you going to categorize that? Well, I've heard about near-death experiences from a religious standpoint. I had this experience. I lived through it. It makes sense that you're going to plop that in the category of, oh, okay, well, I had a near-death experience. Maybe I saw God. Like usually it's the God that you were raised to believe, surprise that you're gonna see. Wonder why. Memory nodes are activating. Like, so it makes sense that people do it to me, but I'm not sure if I would. Yeah.
And it makes sense what you're saying about being because atheism is still a relatively small percentage of people worldwide, and so it makes sense that people who have mental illness or kind of a brain that fewer people are going to be atheists. So the percentage of people are going to have religious symptoms because they're religious. Like when I was younger, I was very Catholic, and so my OCD manifested as pray the rosary this many times and in this way, and pray in this way, and compulsive what do you call it? God, it's been a long time.
Okay.
confessions and things like that. And now that I'm not religious, it's more of rewriting and counting and not religious things. And so that kind of shift makes sense because I'm not embedded in it as much.
It does, yeah.
Can I ask just one question about delusions? I just want to clarify my understanding.
Sure, if it's relatively quick, because we do have like several more calls and we're running towards the end. Sorry.
I'm sorry. It's very quick. I just
sure.
want to make my understanding clear that delusions aren't just false beliefs that people have despite the evidence, which
Correct.
a lot of people use to say that religion is mental illness, because if that was true, then everyone who just is mistaken about something would be delusional. And that it's more that the person has a false belief that contradicts their paradigm. Like they have
preaching to the choir. I did a whole very long video with citations about this very thing and said basically the same thing that you just said. So not going to get a disagreement.
I'm a complete lay person. I just want to make sure that that I did the right research on that.
Yeah, no, I did. You did. You absolutely did. But we do have to let you go. I appreciate your call, Emily. It was very nice to chat with you. I hope you have a good day.
You too. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.